Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this first event of the celebration of our 40th anniversary of the New School of Architecture and Design. I am Michael Steffner, Professor Emeritus of Architecture and Urban Design, and I have the honor of introducing a 40-year legacy of human-centered design, a conversation with our New School alumni. A few opening comments before I introduce the moderator for this evening's conversation, Steve Russell, who will in turn introduce the panel to all of us. One of my favorite urban philosophers, Yogi Berra, the former catcher for the New York Yankees, once said, "You don't know where you're going, you don't know where you are unless you know where you've been, and you don't know where you're going unless you know where you are." And that's the theme of our 40th anniversary celebration, the past, the present, and the future. And tonight we begin with the past. The New School of Architecture and Design has an important history and legacy in our community and in the professions. Over 50 years ago, the San Diego architectural community began advocating for a School of Architecture in San Diego to be located either SDSU or UCSD. The advocacy was based on two major points. San Diego was a growing region, a lot was happening, and it would be good context for students to learn about the built environment, and the community would benefit from a local architectural institution, a school that could generate ideas about the future, something we continue to do today. And the second reason was that there were many potential architecture students in San Diego who for many reasons could not go elsewhere to attend architectural school, and this was a place to do it. Fortunately for us, both SDSU and UCSD passed on the opportunity to be the home of the New School of Architecture. So Dick Welch, an instructor in the architecture program at Southwestern Community College, with two of his colleagues, Joe Nicholson, who was with the school until he passed a few years ago, and Wayne Donaldson, decided to do it themselves. And they wanted to have a program that would be different than the more traditional architectural programs. They borrowed a name and an educational format from the New School of Social Research in New York to have a different kind of approach to education. And the New School of Architecture was born in a warehouse in an industrial park in Chula Vista 40 years ago. In 1998, Rich Liu wrote an article about New School in the San Diego Union Tribune and described us as a small architectural college with a predilection for contrarian thinking. And I think that's a point of pride that we still maintain today. Our anniversary events will look at where we are. The pandemic has called this a time of reflection, a pivot point. It has brought a new sense of urgency to address economic disparity, social equity, and climate change, and how the built environment is impacted by those and how we impact the built environment. And then the future. What should our graduates be addressing and how will they address these problems? Our late President Marvin Malika gave us a charge. He said, "I want students that graduate from this school to be citizen architects and designers, to take their special way of seeing and going into the community to deal with the big issues of the community." Tonight, we will hear from a number of our alumni who have been following Marvin's charge throughout their career. Our moderator for this evening is Steve Russell. Steve came to New School as a mid-career change. He had been working in public policy and community and economic development. Steve was a policy advisor to then City Council member Tony Atkins. When he became acquainted with New School, he was invited to attend juries on community studio projects. Steve decided to study architecture. And after graduation in 2010, Steve went to work for Platt Whitelaw Architects. But he took his public policy work and his architectural work, put them together, and 5 years ago, he became the executive director of the San Diego Housing Federation. He's on the board of the California Housing Finance Agency. And as a student in 2009, Steve became a member of the New School Foundation. He was our president, and he is still a member of that board. And Steve had a very important role in the last election. He led the charge on Measure A $900 million housing bond, which didn't pass, but pointed out that we have a role to play with housing in this community and an interest in doing it because of the 57% vote. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let him introduce the panel and carry on this evening. Welcome, everybody.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you for that introduction. Welcome everybody to this wonderful panel. I'm really honored to be here. It's the New School has been a very important part of my life, and I have to say that I owe it to, or can blame Mr. Stepner for that strange diversion in my life that I went back to school. I asked him at the age of 40. I was, as he said, employed at the city, whether he thought it was crazy. I was thinking of going back to architecture school, and did he think I was crazy? And his answers were, yes, you're crazy, and yes, you should do it. And that was really a pivotal moment in my life. I'd admired his work for so long. As he said, I'd been on juries in the class, and I never dreamed. I used to go there and see the adults playing with colored pencils and making models and all this stuff. I thought, I want to go to kindergarten again. So finally, at the age of 41, I got to do that. And it was transformational in terms of how I was able to think about this world, to learn about this world. And that's what the school was about, was that everybody could come to it with their own idea of what they wanted to do in this world. And the school is there to give us the tools to do that. You're going to see a great demonstration of that tonight as we talk to a lot of the alumni from several years. Over all these years, and the many, many varied places they've been and the varied work that they've done. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and with each introduction, I'm going to ask them to answer a question, and then we'll have some more discussion at the end. There'll be an opportunity for all of you to ask your questions, share your memories, and really let's come together as a community through this process. So I'm going to start this off with Athena Valdovinos, who is Masters of Construction Management, and is a senior project engineer at Swinnerton. She's class of 2016 and winner of the 2013 and 2015 ASC Reno competition. She helped lead those teams. So she's done mixed-use high-rises in downtown San Diego. She's done the Palomar South Education Center, Sharp Grossmont Hospital infill. So Athena Valdovinos, I'm going to ask you, what was your experience at New School that stands out?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor and a pleasure. My experience at New School was very transformational. I came to New School, an 18-year-old with this dream to change the world, and studied architecture undergrad. Then somewhere in my second year, George Welch, a professor came to me and said, hey, I'm putting together this team, and I think you should be a part of it. And so I went to the first meeting for the ASC Reno student competition in the VD&C category. And sitting in the first meeting, I was like, I'm not sure why I'm here. But I saw the process and the teaming that came together, and we ended up building a great team. And I was exposed to the construction industry and found that it was really a place that I wanted to be, and a community and a culture in an industry that I loved.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Athena. And I think what you said about changing the world is a theme you're going to hear a lot about from the alumni here, because I certainly heard it from all of my fellow students all the years that I was there. Let's go next to Claudia Salazar, who not only earned a Master of Architecture from New School, but also taught here for many, many years. She's Senior Director of Design at Studio G Architects. She's class of 1998. Claudia, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Thank you, Stephen. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm just delighted to say that my journey with New School of Architecture, really went beyond the classroom. I'd had a tremendous experience, and I'll, get an opportunity to share that with you. But, I want to talk about the legacy that I carry with New School wherever I go. I had the opportunity to work with 10 years with Austin B. and Robbins Prashel, wonderful architectural firm in San Diego, and spent almost 13 years with Gensler, both in San Diego and San Jose, and recently joined Studio G in Silicon Valley, and I'm just delighted to be here. I've served as the board of trustees for the Museum of Photographic Arts in San Diego, and it's my second term, and I can say that, my upbringing at New School of Architecture has been, what I bring to the table, and, a spirit of collaboration, a spirit of inspiration and vision, and charting new roads ahead. And I'll leave it at that. More to come.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you, Claudia. And I want to talk a lot more. There's a lot of international themes here today, and I think the folks will talk about their work internationally as we get through the evening here. In fact, the next speaker, Armando Ramos, Principal of Diverse Projects. class of 2003, and he's been a part of some very interesting projects such as rethinking downtown Mexico City with Gale Architects, founding an urban forum to rethink the future, and leading free architects in New York City. Armando Ramos, could you talk about your experience at New School?
Yes, thank you, New School. Thank you, Stephen. It was a very interesting time in my life because it was my introduction to America. It was my introduction into coming into the United States. I came from a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience professionally. And what attracted me was this everything goes sort of feeling. It was very open as the building. The building was a big warehouse as it is today. And, you know, I thought I would come to learn in a master's in more technical education, and that's sort of where I was coming from. But it taught me to think differently. We had an international faculty. We had people, teachers from the Middle East, from Asia, from Latin America. And that really opens up your mind. And I found that the practice of architecture is very different in different countries, certainly between Mexico and the United States. Not better nor worse, just very different, a very different mindset. So that introduction was great. It was what I really needed, and also for those that know me, I was very stubborn, I guess, and I thought I already knew a lot, but the teachers and the crits and everybody that came just working with us and opening our brains to think differently and start thinking about processes and different approaches. Certainly changed the direction that I was looking for in my career. And lastly, I believe it was the first year that Gil Cook came into the school as well. And he was certainly a pivotal figure in my life as a mentor, as a teacher, as a friend. And he changed both him and the school changed the course of my career, for the rest of my life.
Well, yes, that's, we hear that story a lot when we talk to folks and their experience at the school. And Gil, similarly, I will attest to the fact that he really made it possible, especially for someone, so many students there are non-traditional students. That's one of the things that is really remarkable about that school. And he made us feel like we belong there. And that was very important. So to Gil Cook. Next, maybe we can hear from David Pfeifer, AIA, lead AP, principal architect at domusstudio, and class of 1987. David, tell us a bit about your experience. Oh, please, you're muted still. I knew I get to say it at least once tonight.
I was one of the earlier students. Graduated in '87. It was actually the third graduating class. And in my younger life, I was always a tinkerer. In high school, I took every shop we had available: metal shop, wood shop, auto shop, and certainly architectural classes. And then as I approached my university path, I looked at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and came across the New School. And what intrigued me was really the hands-on approach, almost the Bauhaus approach. All the professors were working professionals. And I really felt like that suited my tinkering nature, my hands-on nature. I mean, I was taught by Gary Allen, who was the architect of Jack Murphy Stadium, C.W. Kim, who did the Emory Shapery Towers, Charles Slurt, who did some wonderful buildings here in San Diego, and Ralph Rosling, who is now one of our peers and still practicing. So really got to learn who the talented people were in our community, and really helped me professionally, and now they're colleagues. I mean, for example, when Charles Slurt, we had a studio and he was having one of his projects photographed by Julius Schulman, and he brought Julius into our studio. And at that time we built cardboard models, and we spent 3 hours talking with Julius about how to photograph architecture. And he brought in his cameras, and we got to just play with the camera and learn how you show and expose architecture. And that's just a microcosm of the New School experience for me. I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but we started with CAD and we were on Apple IIe's. And I remember I broke one because I was drawing Richard Rogers' Renault factory. and it was saving it on a floppy disk, and it literally melted. And I remember Dick Welsh and his wife gave me the stink eye for that. But it was fun. It was inquisitive and experimental, and I mean, like that hands-on approach is still present at the New School now. So I thank you for inviting me this evening, and congratulations to the New School.
Yeah, no, David, I think you really put your finger on it, is that the hands-on approach is really what made a difference. These were practitioners. These were not academics. There's certainly a lot of academic thinking going on there, but there were real practitioners teaching us, and that's what made all the difference. Let's next hear from Jake Jaenicke. He graduated from New School of Architecture and Design, the construction management program, in 2013, and immediately started working with Balfour Beatty Construction as a project engineer, and currently operates as a project manager on a high school project in Point Loma, San Diego. Jake, do you want to talk about your experience at New School?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Thank you all for having me here tonight. So I had a bit of an unconventional way that I found New School. I was actually at Saddleback Community College in Mission Viejo. I was in a architectural drafting class. I had every intention of being an architect in my junior college years. And it turns out all I can draw is boxes with more boxes in it. And my right brain is a little lax, or my left brain, whichever way that goes. So not so creative. And my teacher at the time was getting his master's at the New School of Architecture and Design. And he said, hey, you like to talk a lot. Maybe you should go that way instead. So I ended up going down there with my grandfather, who was an architect for many years until his retirement. And the thing that drew me to the school was, just as David mentioned, was the working professionals that were the instructors. I sensed that immediately when I came to New School, that I was no longer in school. I was in a shop with a bunch of people that knew exactly what they were talking about, because they were out there doing it. And I really felt that. So coming to New School and getting to know a lot of the professionals in the area really boosted my career when I graduated. Now, just one little fun thing to talk about being at New School is the late nights. Like many of you have probably forgot studio nights, or you haven't, either way. In the construction management program, we didn't necessarily have studio nights, but being on a quarterly system, it's quick. You're always at school. You live and die with your friends that you're in class with. And we learned how to set up ping pong nets just with cardboard boxes and tables in the studios. And that always sticks with me, with just the camaraderie of the New School students and how we all still stay in touch with each other. So thank you for having me. Congratulations, New School. This is a great event.
It is. And so you probably remember, well, some of you who remember when there were kickball tournaments on all the parking lots that surrounded the school at the time, because it was an island, it was a battleship floating in the middle of what was not East Village yet. It was quite a scary place in some ways. But that was part of the grit. And those of us, actually most of us, got to see San Diego rise around us. And that's something that's really remarkable about the location there, and especially the old building up in the second floor. We've got a variety of programs there now, and some of them were started right about the time that I was leaving, including our industrial design and consumer design section. And one of our graduates here, Chad Skelton, graduated summa cum laude from New School in June of 2019 with a product design degree. And he's currently the lead industrial designer at SC Design Company in Carlsbad, California, where he produces designs for a multitude of products. And so, Chad, could you talk about your experience at New School?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, again, thank you all for having me. It's awesome to be representing product design here with Marcelo. To all the product designers watching, you guys are awesome. And to everyone else, you guys are pretty cool too. So originally I was dead set on going to school for transportation design. I've always loved drawing cars. And I was planning on going up north, up to San Francisco, to pursue transportation design. And then I decided to check out New School, and I was linked up with the Dean of Design, Elena, and she basically told me everything I wanted to hear. She basically told me, you can design cars, but you can also design every other product known to man. I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. That sounds cool. So I started, and looking back, the experience was great overall. I mean, just the subtle nuances of the people that you meet and the events that they had, everything from having a nacho bar with Priska and Rose and Ashley to going down to Mexico with one of the professors to learn how to build a house out of mud and hay, or even having to pause during a studio presentation just to let the trolley go by. There were just little things like that that I really enjoyed. But on top of everything, I think it comes back to the camaraderie of New School. Our classes were small, especially in the design program, but we were all such close friends. I know some of you are watching today, and I really, really appreciate you guys. And it was just so nice being able to have people to rely on. Sure, it was competitive at times, but at the end of the day, everybody had our best interest in mind, and there was always someone there to help you, including the instructors.
Well, and I think you just underscored too that we all have our own unique path that brought us here. Amazing that we came to this one place, and our paths took us in so many other places. But it's this magic spot in the middle where we came together, influenced one another like neutrinos or something, and shot off into the universe to do something else. Marcelo Cortez, who's our next speaker here, next alumnus, has yet another unique path that he arrived at New School as a political strategist before he was a designer of any kind. Marcelo, would you like to talk about your New School experience?
Yeah, so it started very unusual way. I came to school after I turned 40, so I think the 40-year-old kind of the theme today. You can see that recurring. But I started my life working as an art director in advertising, but I think the bulk of my career was spent in political campaigns. We did like 7 presidential campaigns in 6 different countries. And after this like last stretch, I decided that I wanted to take a break and take a year off. And I first decided to come to San Diego, and I knew that I couldn't just stay still at home for a year. I came with my family, but I wanted to do something. So I found the school, I reached out to the school, and I think because of the bad accent between me, my Brazilian accent, and Stefania, which was in enrollment at the time, and her Italian accent, because of a good accident between our accents, I got into school because I was looking for something to do for 10 months, maybe a year at the most. And she was trying to tell me, do you realize this is a 4-year program? And I understood, do you realize this is a full year program? So, and I would like very adamantly say, yes, I realize I'm committed for the full year. And she said, 4 year, and I'm full year. And between my full year and the 4 years, I entered school and I stayed, and the family decided to stay here. We came for a 1-year break, and we decided to live here in California. I finally graduated from product design. And now at what I do today at Manscaped, I got a chance after being like the very first product design graduation class in New School. I kind of have this opportunity to work in both product design and the branding and strategy that I actually did before I joined New School too. So it was a very good experience. I think I had a great time. It was a lot of learning. I think the fact that it was a very hands-on school for me was amazing because I got a chance to use all that I knew about being creative and strategy oriented, but turning that into a new discipline, which was product design. So I'm pretty happy to be here today, and congratulations, New School. And yeah, that's how it started.
Wow. No, so many different paths. Well, yet another path was followed by Melina Aluwi, AIA, who's here today. She's a studio leader and an associate principal at HED San Diego. And you've worked in both private and public sector buildings, but you had a very different approach to architecture before. I mean, I should say a very different path that brought you to architecture. Would you like to talk a little bit about that and the New School, Melina?
Sure. Yeah. So Stephen's referring to, I had a previous career completely different from architecture. Before I joined New School, I was at a CPA at a Big Four accounting firm in LA. So very different path, but always had a passion for architecture. And what really stood out to to me and stands out to me about my time at New School are really just two things. And I think a lot of my fellow panelists have already said some very similar aspects, but first one was the collaborative environment, the learning and working with my classmates in studio, and the discussion and project critiques, which I think are so unique to what architects do and truly what you will experience in real life to some degree. And then the second thing would be the tools and the skills and the lessons learned from some of the great teachers and mentors that a lot of folks here have already mentioned. I just remember I was consistently challenged and pushed to go often beyond my limits. And I'm so grateful for that. So again, thank you for having me here today, and congratulations, New School.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for agreeing to be grilled here on the internet by me, because this is, if you've ever been to the alley rounds, you know sometimes I can get a little bit sharp, but I won't be tonight. This is a 40th anniversary party. We're here to celebrate and really enjoy. Well, we've got another question I'd like to ask each of you, and I'm going to start with Claudia. Perhaps you could tell us about your career and some of your contributions, projects, neighborhoods, communities, and really how does design thinking and human-centered design weave through the work that you've done?
Absolutely. You know, one thing that I forgot to mention before is that I come from an interior design background. And when I joined New School of Architecture, it was to really augment, you know, my overall approach to design, and, you know, see not just the idea making, but go, you know, beyond that and see it built. And I think that the career, it started at New School, right? In that we were, or I was allowed to be close to the practitioners and develop ideas that, you know, came to fruition early on, and being able to see, you know, from beginning to end. And I think that's important to a journey of a student, where you can, you know, truly, you know, touch and feel the idea, right? You know, what significant projects I've, you know, been able to, you know, influence in the community, particularly in San Diego. Many have been also interior projects, and dear to my heart is the Museum of Photographic Arts. Had the pleasure to work on a transformational project back in 2016. And that, you know, that showcase the ability to express my ability as designer, to stretch my thinking, to create an amazing rapport with the community of you know, great minds that are at the museum. And also, you know, at the end of that journey, they've asked me to come and be part of the board of trustees. This summer, they reached back and they said, we'd like you to come back. And, you know, I'm serving on my second term. And, you know, I think that's another way of influencing the community through the arts, and bringing the, you know, the knowledge that you have through the lens of, you know, architecture and design, and the impact that it has on the engagement of people. This is one of the, you know, greatest institutions of being able to broaden, you know, how, you know, influence, you know, how people view the world through a lens and storytelling. So, you know, that's has been very influential in terms of like my impact. Stephen, I don't know if I've taken enough airspace, so let me know.
Well, no, thank you. And I think you've underscored one of the things that what we can contribute, each of us, and especially I would say this to the students who might be watching us tonight, is that the role of serving on a nonprofit board, whether in your case it was something very artistic or if it's something more socially oriented, there's great value that we all bring, and the perspectives we learn at the New School add to that value. You know, I want to continue on the theme of human-centered design and some of what your work is, and maybe I could go to David, because you have a practice, part of a practice that is very much about the human and the spiritual. Yes?
Yeah, I'll self-unmute this time. When I graduated from the New School, I've really been at only 2 firms through my career. I worked with James McGraw and Associates that now transitioned to McGraw Baldwin. And then I joined a firm called Dominique Cecil Anderson. And I've been with this firm for 33 years. 20 years ago, became a owner and principal. And when I came in, it was really green and a new graduate. And what I've been able to do is kind of mold the firm into how I envision a practice should work. And it really is about listening to your client and wrapping walls around what their goals are, what their programs are, what they're trying to do. And through architecture, you're not going to solve all the world's problems, but you can help these folks, whether they're nonprofits or otherwise, do what they're doing better. And, if we all collectively raise the bar for each other, good things will happen. Again, just being really blessed to build this practice. We have 20 employees, almost half of them are women. And, over the last 30 years, I've really seen a diversification of our profession. I just think it's fantastic. And in our firm, we use words like we, us, our, together. Very few times do we use I or me, because we are a studio and everybody contributes to every project. So we have developed over 300 projects in Southern California. And what's the best one? The last one. And what's the next best one will be the next one. And each project we push each other to all get better. And our clientele are all people who keep their buildings. They're trying to fulfill a mission, whether it be religious or educational or public safety. And it makes every day fresh and exciting. Every project is different, every site is different, every program is different, every client is different. 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth. So you listen and see more than you should say, and really let the project evolve and become what it needs to become. And that's what keeps it fresh for all of us here. And toot our horn a little bit. We just got AIA award a couple of weeks ago. We just got a national award just last week for one of our projects. So to me, it's not about, excuse me?
Could you name those projects for us so folks can look them up?
Sure. Gloria Day Lutheran Church won an architectural award through the American Institute of Architects and an Energy and Sustainability Award. Very sustainable. Kind of a sidebar about that project. It's not your everyday church. It's a big box. So Jake, there's a place for boxes. And what is wonderful about it is the pastor there challenged his congregation. He said, we're not building this church for us. We're building this for our kids. So let's make a place where the kids will be comfortable and find their way, to this ethical goal that we learn in church. And the tangent here is the back of the box is this giant nano wall operable partition, 50 feet wide. And outside of that is this wonderful garden with stone benches and kind of a contemplative labyrinth. But in COVID, they open that up. People sit in the garden and they can worship, in consistent with separation and distancing. So good design does a lot of stuff, whether you intended it or not. And the national award we just got for Sacred Heart, a Catholic church over in Coronado. We tried to sympathetically plug into a campus where there's an Irving Gill building. So we call it, we try to be the respectful and quiet little sister. And let Gill flourish, and we just sit in there nicely and don't make too much noise.
That's important, because most buildings, not everything can be a marquee building in a neighborhood, or else it becomes cacophony. Sometimes, like Times Square, yes, everything is supposed to be in your face, but things need to be good neighbors. And churches, it's interesting. Churches are among the marquee projects when we're especially in class. The things you always want to do are churches. The other though is museums. And Armando, you've done a lot of work. I think the Museo Somaya is one in particular. Would you like to talk about that a little bit, and some of your other works that are really that's where people gather? Can you talk about that experience and what that was like?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate because I've been around a lot of that. when I had a firm in Tijuana, and I had really large projects, and I was very young, and I thought that was the peak of my career. And then I got to meet Frank Gehry, and I got to convince him to design a building with me. And he looked at me, he told me that I looked like an architect, which I replied that he did as well. And then I finally convinced him, and when he told me that we might do a building together, I thought that was the highlight of my career. And then that didn't happen, but they invited me to work, with him and to be a director at Gehry Technologies. That's when we did Museo Sumaya, which is an amazing building, not only because of the shape, not only because of what it represents, but because it had never been done before. So to explore and to challenge the unthinkable was very cool. And again, I thought that was the peak of my career. And bringing, I think what was more important than the building was changing people's mindset and bringing Gehry's technology into Mexico and then Brazil, and challenging people that said this couldn't be done, or it couldn't be done with Mexican labor or with Mexican companies, because at one point we called Sainer, but it was too expensive. So we ended up doing it with a local company that they said, yeah, we can do this. We can do the hexagons, 16,000 different hexagons, and they delivered. And again, I thought that was the peak of my career. And then, I went to New York. We had a show at the Guggenheim, and I thought, okay, this is the peak of my career. This is it. I've made it in life. And then, that was not it. That then I got invited by the MoMA and recognized by the Museum of Modern Art. These things that you dream as a student, that you never think that you're going to be around the Frank Gehry's or the Guggenheim or the Museum of Modern Art is going to recognize you. And they invited me to their PS1 competition. I was blown away. And as I reflect about my career and accomplishments, I can tell you that being around, making a living as an architect for the last 20 years, I think that's the accomplishment. I'm just starting. And 200 of us start at architecture school, dreaming to do a small building, any building, and then only 50 finish. And then when you finish, how many of us get to practice architecture? How many of us get to practice architecture 20 years after we have graduated? So I think that's the accomplishment in itself. It's to still be around and to try to still challenge yourself, be curious. And to try to change the world. Another thing that it was not iconic, but rethinking Mexico City certainly was a big deal, to a more human city, less cars, more walkable, more inclusive. So to see our profession shifting into the direction of inclusiveness, less density, of more livable, lovable spaces, was definitely a highlight. So I'm very grateful, and it's been great so far.
Wonderful. Well, so I do want to turn the question of design thinking and human-centered design to our construction management and industrial design folks. But let me first ask Melina, if you could talk about your career, your some projects that stand out, and how human-centered design really is at the heart of that.
Yeah, I think Armando kind of touched on the fact that I think to be an architect is to be a lifelong student. There's really just no end to what you can learn as an architect, or any of actually the disciplines that we represent on this panel. And I think that's what's so unique about it. I've mostly, my focus has predominantly been on education type projects. And I've also had the opportunity to play key roles on the commercial, civic, and cultural side of things in terms of project types, including a flagship museum here in San Diego as well, the Comic-Con Museum that's opening later or next year for all the Comic-Con fans out there. And I mean, to be able to work across market segments is also something I love so much. It challenges you to think differently about the different types of people that use the space. I'd say almost everything has an educational aspect to it. specifically at the Comic-Con Museum, they are about doing a day to night museum experience and having an education component for all ages, different times of the day, and having an education center as a part of that. So that really was my focus for that project, and being able to merge that with a very specific clientele. No project is like the other. And I think that's what's so refreshing about what we do. And as Armando said, if we are granted and blessed the opportunity to do those types of projects, those are things that we absolutely should be grateful for. So.
Yeah, and that's a very internal project. I mean, there's a little bit of your work will be seen at the doorway, right? When the portal, but everything else has to be within this historic envelope.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you must be familiar with the project. Yes, absolutely. It's a very unique, and if you've been to the site, it is absolutely all about the interiors with hopes to bleed out to the exterior. But for those that are unfamiliar, it's located in Balboa Park near the Automotive Museum.
Well, and very notably at the Pan American Plaza, which has just been reclaimed as
Correct.
A plaza. It's been a parking lot all these years. And I would ask those of you who love the park to go there and just experience that, because with the transformation, buildings that were kind of outliers and blobs now have the dignity of a setting, right? You can stand in a plaza and you can see the geometry of these buildings that were just, you can look at them for their composition as opposed to feeling alienated. It's a beautiful thing how that's coming together. I didn't realize you had been working in that particular space. That's wonderful. Because the human experience extends all the way out to the outdoors, and that's something very important. Well, let me ask. I'd like to, with human-centered design, I'm going to challenge the construction manager folks on this call to talk a little bit. Athena, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Talk about some of the projects you've really loved, but can you tie that back to human-centered design and things you learned at the New School?
Oh, can I? One of the things that really drew me to construction was how it really is at the end of the day all about the people. And that goes in multi-dimensions. I think that it's about the people that will be inhabiting the space, but also about the people who are building it. So when I graduated with the mantra of, I want to work downtown on a high-rise for Swinnerton. And there were a lot of reasons for this, but the production high-rise environment I saw as a way to learn about efficiencies and lean building, and also just building to an incredibly fast schedule. When I got to these projects, I found that I was on site with 200 people in a business all about people, and trying to find new ways to motivate people who have had maybe a different life experience than I have had with different training, and get them to buy into the idea of, this is our project, we're going to build it together, we're going to build it the best it can be built, and it's going to turn out awesome. And I spent the first few years of my career doing that, and I found it very rewarding. I then started to transition to focus on building for healthcare. And I think healthcare design and construction is absolutely human-centered. The patient experience is what it's all about, and how we can design and build to make it more efficient for the people who are working there, but also for the people who may be having the best day of their life or the worst day of their life. And I have been working in active hospitals, which we are constantly thinking about the humans and the people there and what our work will be doing to them. In the short term, in the immediate, we have to put a hole in this wall. And in the long term, when we leave, this wall is going to look like this. So, thank you.
Yeah, that's some good thoughts there. And I'm going to turn to Jake as well, because how would you approach, or I guess I would say, how is your work when you think of human-centered design? How is that influenced, and what are some things you've worked on where that really came to the fore?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've been fortunate to work with a couple firms such as HED and Gensler, and the work that they do, mainly what I work on is educational buildings. So anything K through 12 and higher educational buildings. So all of those buildings have a human-centered focus. They're there with the intent of providing an educational space for the students and providing a great classroom for the teachers to be able to teach those students to their highest ability. So it's wonderful because the way I get really excited about a job is I go meet the end user. I meet the teacher, I get to meet the students. I've built a couple athletic facilities, so I get to go meet the coach and their team, you know, and they look at the renderings and they say, wow, we've been working out under the gym bleachers for 20 years and now we have a facility to do that in. And that's what really makes this industry amazing, is we get to do these things that change people's lives. I mean, that gym may have made a mediocre athlete an all-star athlete, and they go on to do great things in athletics or whatever it is, right? But the human-centered focus of education is everything. And another part to that is not just the end product, is I'm always working on active campuses. The current project I'm on is at Point Loma High School. For those of you that may not be familiar, it's the second oldest school in the district of San Diego Unified. It was built in 1925 originally, and it's had several modifications since then. But lucky for me, the building I'm building is in the direct middle of the school. So I've got student access all the way around me at all times, with construction and teacher and student interface all the time. And we have to be very sensitive to the fact that we're not a construction site. We're building on a school. We have to be sensitive to the noise. We have to be sensitive to what's said, right? People can get a little rowdy. So it's a business of people. It's me working with the design team. It's me working with the end user. And we're all here to get that vision that you guys so gracefully do well built. So it's, yeah.
Well, and so that's, I think, on the meta scale, you know, human-centered design, you're building structures that people are using. When we get to the industrial design, we're talking about things where it's much more intimate. These are things that are fitted to the hand or to the humans. Marcelo, can you talk about some of the projects or products and how human-centered design really played into the creation?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to be honest, when we're talking about human-centric design, I have a hard time thinking about a non-human-centric design. Like, what would that be? I think from the
it'd be a freeway.
Yeah, I mean, even that. I mean, there's humans traffic, you know, moving on that. There's always a human in the other side at any point, and it may take a few steps, but there's always the human element there that you were kind of thinking about when you're doing something. I think, especially for me, coming from communication and from political strategy, and everything that we did was extremely based on, you know, like how this will be appreciated, perceived, used, consumed, whatever the verb is, by people, by you know, and sometimes for a large group of people, like an extremely large group of people, like a whole country, sometimes for a smaller group of people, but nevertheless, there's always people involved. So I think that background kind of made for me a very natural approach to design, as thinking of, you know, the human first, the human element as the first thing, as the very first thing that we think about when we are trying to do anything. And that was something that when I got to the school, I felt that, you know, it was a quick and direct connection to the things I've done before, although there was no relationship directly to product design, but it was very similar in the way we approach solving problems, because we are trying to put ourselves in the shoes of other person. One of the things that I really think it's a very strong characteristic for a product designer is this ability that we have to either have it or develop, that is to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And I think, and we had a lot of these examples in class, in the studio classes, where, you know, our products were geared toward like pregnant women, right? It's an experience that I can try, but I'll never have. And I have to put myself through that mindset and to try to understand and incorporate that state of mind and, you know, the state of things for 9 months and even more to be able to effective design. So I think in a way there's part of a designer talent that is, it's almost like being an actor. You know, you need to really study your lines and incorporate the character to do really good design. And I mean, that's a part of the job that I like, that I really like, that I really love, is being able to be empathetic to different people, different situations, different countries, different perspectives, and trying to learn what that perspective would be.
Well, so I've seen, Chad, you've been nodding like, I want to talk about this topic. Talk to me about some of your professional accomplishments in human-centered design in that context.
Yeah, so I've been super fortunate. I was hired right out of school last year. I'm probably the most recent grad out of the panel here. But yeah, what's great about my job is I get to work on such a large multitude of projects that are in some industries that I really don't know a lot about. So I have to kind of tie it back to that human-centered approach that we had at New School, where I have to think, how would somebody who loves this industry use this product, rather than how would I use this product as an outsider? So I really have to take that into account on all of these new projects that come in, because I guess one contribution that I've made recently is I was fortunate enough to design golf clubs for Kirkland Signature to be sold in Costco's nationwide. And so I designed a 3-piece wedge set that was just released about a month ago through all the Costco stores. And what was really, really cool about that project is I feel like I'm kind of on the cusp of really disrupting the golf industry with this, because the golf industry, it's a really traditional industry. And what we were able to accomplish is we're basically selling 3 wedges for the price of 1 like good performance wedge, but we're doing it obviously at 1/3 of the price. And our wedges perform just as good and have just as good quality to them, which I think is really important for us designers to maybe reduce the barriers of entry for certain new skills that people might want to learn. So of course, there's a lot of golf elitists who are saying, this is crazy, you're selling 3 wedges for the price of 1. But how I see it is, the more the merrier. I mean, we're all people, we all deserve to try new things. And maybe some people can't get into golf because the barrier of entry is so expensive for equipment. So I feel like it's really, really neat to work on projects like this, where I can bring really high quality performance products into a market, but allow anyone to be able to try, or anybody try to get into that overall skill set. So that's been a really neat project. And I don't golf much, so obviously I've had to kind of take my schooling into account of how I can really get into the mindset of golfers and what they might like and what they might use to be able to create a really, really good product for the end user.
Well, I like what you talked about, the barrier to entry, because with my last question here is going to be about what do you see 40 years from now? And in a moment here, I'm going to ask for maybe a volunteer to be the first one to respond. But I'd like to frame this a little bit, because I think what you just talked about, this barrier to entry and cost being a barrier to entry, and an economy we live in right now, I mean, the forces that are tearing at this world, we have an economy that's a dual economy where tax receipts for the state are much higher than they expected, because half the consumers are actually doing quite well, right? Refining their houses and saving money on going out. Half the economy, half the people are doing terribly. They're wage workers, and they're just being absolutely facing punishing layoffs and evictions and things like that. We live in this duality. That's one problem, obviously. That is a challenge to getting to 40 years. Sustainability, environmental sustainability. I mean, we have to be a profession of a tremendous optimism. When you build something with a 100-year lifespan, if it's a building, or a 20-year lifespan, if it's certain kinds of products, there's still an optimism that it's going to be useful in 20 or 40 years, and there will be people here to enjoy it. So, I mean, given this world we're in with all of its troubles, we're optimists. And so I'd like to ask each of you to talk a little bit about what you see in the next 40 years. How do you see yourself contributing, yourself evolving to rise to that? And because that's a challenging question, maybe a little different than we framed it when we practiced, I'm going to ask if anyone's willing to volunteer to be the first responder to that particular question. Before I call in, or I could play the professor like we used to. Athena.
I volunteer.
Go for it.
I'm hoping that in the immediate future, sooner than 40 years, we start to see more integrated thinking and integrated processes. Maybe this happens in the disciplines, but getting voices of people who haven't maybe traditionally been in that role to be in a place where they feel comfortable to speak up. I specifically am biased, but would like to see more women in construction in administrative roles, but also in the field, in the trades. And I think with people who maybe are laid off or don't have a job right now, and the labor pool needs some new blood, it could be a good opportunity for a lot of people.
Excellent. Would someone like to follow Athena on that? Or what you see for you? Yes, Claudia, please. Oh, I've heard Claudia first.
I'll unmute.
Then Melina.
I wanted to build up on the comment that Athena made, and I think it's our responsibility to make opportunities for others. I'm looking at the panel right now, and one of the things that I see is diversity, and I see diversity across the spectrum of women being here on the panel. We're all different ages, we're all different backgrounds. And in our industry, we talked about the human-centered approach. Well, we need to start hiring, with that lens. We need to start inviting everyone to participate in our institution. And I think that's the legacy that New School of Architecture has left in our hearts, is that, the inclusivity, right? We were probably not using that term, but New School had it in, and it's been carrying that, that banner very close to their values. And I just for me, that's the hope, that we continue to make those opportunities for everyone that's out there.
That's wonderful. Melina, you were ready to respond as well. Would you like to?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with both Athena and Claudia. But I think also, Stephen, you were mentioning the changes that we're seeing, and so much of it in so many different aspects at the same time. I think one of the things that we are going to see probably even sooner than 40 years, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, is truly how we integrate technology into what we do and how to better serve our clients. People want things faster sometimes. How do we find efficiencies in what we do? I don't think that technology or artificial intelligence will ever replace that human-centered, the human process, the open-ended process, at least not yet. But I do think that that's something that we need to stay on the cutting edge of and fully embrace versus reject, or, it's going to happen. And I think that's going to be something that'll truly differentiate us as individuals going forward, as well as the firms as we move forward and grow.
And the technology, I think, is a very pointed point, given, look what we're doing right now, which is something that allows us to come together. And not everyone is in San Diego right now who's on this call, on the Zoom. So it allows us to come together, but it also is very distancing, right? And so but it has changed. And so that's something that we will never be the same as pre-COVID, pre-Zoom. And yet it has brought some benefits. And so that's something I think that we need to be looking at. Who else would like to be? This is kind of a more contemplative question. Armando, you're leaning forward. I also see Jake and Marcel. So I'm gonna just call on Jake, because Jake, you were the first one I saw unmuted, actually. And then we'll go to Marcelo and Armando.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I think the industry, so I'm going to preface this, is that the construction industry in particular tends to lag behind what has already happened, in a sense that they're late adopters in many ways. And there's a revolution, I think, with the new era of people coming in, and it's no longer the people running the companies now typically came through the trades. They worked on job sites when they were 16, and then they started working for a company when they were 18, and so on and so forth. And there's this new wave of people coming out that are saying it doesn't have to be this way, and they're challenging the norms. And New School does a great job. Someone, maybe Claudia, you mentioned that, was you got challenged, you got pushed. You're always being asked to step outside and say, can we do this better, more efficiently, and differently, like Athena said. And my hope for the next 40 years is that that gap between the construction industry and their ability to adapt to the new technologies that we're presented with, like AI and drones and robotics, I hope that that gap closes. And New School, what New School does so great, and this is why I love the school so much, was they didn't train architects and construction managers necessarily. They created people that are able to freely think and want to freely think. And with obviously classes that were enforced with design and construction minds, but the school has done such a good job at producing people that can think. I go back and recruit frequently, and I'll recruit at San Diego State, and I'll recruit at New School, and I'll recruit at some other schools. And I'm always just drawn to how great the students that come out of New School are. They're thinking, they want to make a difference. So this is a long way of saying it. I want to see that gap close. There's great industry people out there. There's the Link Construction Institute, which is looking at ways to make us more efficient as a whole. So that's my hope for the next 40 years, in short.
Yeah, very, very, again, very on point. I mean, we look at housing as my world right now, and for most housing, for single family housing in particular, and stick frame, we haven't seen productivity gains. It's the only industrial sector where we have not seen 1,000% productivity gains over the last 50 years. It's essentially the same. And yes, there's entrenched interests in the trades and others. Trust me, I've got some bruises from that. But modular housing is something we need to look at, and other ways of product delivery and thinking about how we produce. So there's a lot there, and I appreciate, Jake, you bringing that up. Marcelo, you were ready, and then I'll go to Armando after that.
Yeah, I mean, and when you said what we see 40 years from now, I know 40 years is a theme, but 4 years from now, I don't know if I'll be here to see anything, but my daughters will. So I don't want to think about them for now, for a moment. But one of the things that the school got me thinking, and again, I'm coming from an industry where things are more ethereal and they kind of last time, as communication and advertising in general is and are. Product is something that you create, you produce, you put it out on the planet. And for the first time, I was pushed to think about the life cycle of a product, like what happens with all those things that you are, pushing out to the planet and promoting and selling. Because even when I wasn't doing product design, I was helping sell products. So my hope for the next 40 years in that area specifically is that we do less. And I know it may sound counterintuitive to being here at a school that does product design, but as we learn, product design is much more than physical products. There's system design, there's even products that are not physical. But even the physical products, I think being mindful of how much do we really need those things, and how will they play a part on this planet, and can we be better than just this idea of pushing more and more and just pushing version 10, version 11, version 12, and keeping up with those crazy cycles of product. So I think that's something that's kind of interesting to start tackling and start pushing on that direction. On maybe the evolution of design is finding a way to do less and still have things keep moving, and the world will keep going and evolving as it is right now. So that's what
Yeah.
that's what I see, especially on like the product design part of the future.
Well, and these pandemic times, the lockdowns and all that are probably very illustrative of the products we have are actually finds the digital content that we need to refresh. The things around us are quite sufficient for the most part for those of us who are fortunate enough to be middle class or above. So yeah, no, I think your point is well made. Armando, would you like to give a take on this 40-year picture? What do you want to be doing, or what do you see the world? Where do you see it arriving?
So I think this pandemic fast forwarded a lot of things we were thinking for this 10 years. We're like 10 years ahead. We're thinking what was the future, and now we're presented to it all of a sudden. Bill Mitchell from MIT predicted that we were all going to be working online and digitally a long time ago. What he didn't predict was that we were going to miss the human interaction. So what I see is that the future is going to be family, the future is going to be friends, the future is going to be this interaction, because innovation happens when we sit together and we talk about things and we interact with each other. We're moving from a consumer-based society to a productive-based society. And half of the population of the world was living in cities before this happened. Now we see people moving out of New York, people moving out of Mexico City, people going into the countryside because it's got to be more human. We cannot be continuing to do dormitory cities, small units. Right now we're seeing the value of space. And when I say space, I mean well-designed space. Basic things that we forgot about, like light, like air, balconies, patios, things that were, in the DNA of architecture for centuries, and then we forgot about these things. And we forgot about the importance of architecture as a backdrop for life and for events to happen. So I think we're seeing the future right now, what's going to happen, and it's going to be this human-based design, interaction, and more humane design and more humane cities that are not profit-driven.
Yeah, no, so I'd actually ask David, if you could respond to that, and we'll go to Chad and then the questions from the audience. So David, please.
Sure, a little more focused. I've been thinking about this question since we initially got together, and I think the way we build, the way we think, the way we do business in the construction and design industry it currently is very siloed. You have your design professionals, you have your engineers, you have your permit process, your bidding process, your construction process, and I'd like to see those barriers, those silos erode. And when I go to a construction site, I find joy in talking to the man making the formwork for the construction for the concrete foundations and the steel laborers. And there's absolute value and skill and knowledge in those trades. And the more we can collaborate and integrate those building processes into the design process, I think that is the future. And I think that there's innovation and efficiency and just betterment in that collaboration instead of just being very myopic in our own little worlds. And I've often been told I suffer from optimism because I always see the beam of light. You walk in a room and you have to think, can make this better. And I think as a design professional, you have to have that DNA. But as we move forward, and whether we can break down those silos or various levels of success, I think, as Armando said, there are human aspects of design and life and living and interaction that have to and will always inform architecture in the sense of place. And again, that optimism, this pandemic has made us all look at our backyard again, made us talk to our neighbor across the fence. And there's definitely a silver lining here, in that we've gotten a chance to pause and think and reevaluate really what is important. And I almost feel like the next year or 2 years are instrumental in what the next 38 and 39 years are going to look like. You know, how are we going to, this COVID thing's going to be with us. And shots or immunizations aside, it's going to be here. And I think the magic is going to be how we deal with this moving forward. And there's going to be something else. There was something 10 years ago, there's going to be something 20 years ago. And it's our ability to think and adapt and not lose that humanity and continue to aspire to do things better. That's what always keeps me smiling and know that this world's going to be a great place.
That's wonderful. You are truly afflicted with optimism. I love it. I love it. As a fellow afflictee. And I think this question, by the way, could have been the whole evening's discussion, just this question. We could have spent the whole evening. Chad, we haven't had a chance to weigh in on this before we go to Q&A and memories. Would you like to give some, you're going to be alive. You're one of the ones on this call. I guarantee you're still going to be alive in 40 years. I don't think I'm going to be here.
Exactly.
But
yeah. And
tell me what I'm going to miss.
Yeah, it might be my 23-year-old naivety or just my natural optimism, but I think the future's looking pretty good. I think one thing is there's such an influx of information at our fingertips at all times. And whether or not this is a good or bad thing, that's a whole other discussion. But one thing that all of this accessibility to information has brought us is a little bit more awareness, I think, to the world around us. And I think people are starting to realize, and I've been noticing it in my generation, that if we keep doing what we're doing, it's not going to be a healthy future. So as a product designer, I feel incredibly responsible for, what I'm going to be doing, because I'm the one that's kind of pushing the markets. I'm the one that kind of decides what people are going to be buying. And so I have two options. I can, make another plastic part that'll break after 6 months and then somebody could just buy a new one because it's convenient and easy. Or I can push for creating something high quality that will last for years and years and years, that somebody could get really good use out of, to keep out of the landfills. So I guess how I see it is I really hope that designers think this way rather than just trying to get a quick dollar making these disposable parts. I think there's a really fine line between disposability and convenience in the product landscape. And I think that all designers should be really trying to make these sustainable, well-working products that people can hang on to and appreciate in the future, rather than just throwing it out after, a year after it breaks and then getting a new one, because that's easy. That's the society we're living in. But luckily, I think we're starting to shift into a mindset that's a little bit more conscious of the future. And if we keep living this way, then it's not going to be too great for us. So I'm hoping that people are starting to wake up to this and realizing that we need to start changing our habits a little bit to look towards more of a sustainable future for the rest of us. And I think, as a designer, it's my duty in a way to everything that I design, try to make it so that it's going to leave a lasting impression, a lasting positive impression on people's lives, rather than a lasting negative impression in our landfills.
Ending up in a whale's stomach or something.
Exactly.
No, that's brilliant. That's a wonderful way, I think, a wonderful note to end this part of the discussion on. Because no, this is, when I was there, sustainability, with human-centered design was as part of the evolution of the school's identity. It is about community, it's about sustainability, it's about people. And we've heard so many perspectives here, and talking now to our audience, that so many different perspectives on what these things can mean. And again, I wish we could have spent the whole evening just talking about that 40-year window, looking back 40, looking forward. But we are at a point now, there's some folks who wanted to say a few words who are not part of the panel here. I'd like to recognize, if he's out there, Dr. Stephen Altman, friend and colleague to many of us. And Stephen, do you have, I'm going to ask Lisa, can you promote him to a speaker here and let him share some words? Okay.
Just learning. Hold on.
This has been a year of learning. This has definitely been. But we're finding, and we are finding part of the future is that these soft experiences. It's like the equipment allows this to happen. Well, what is this content? And this content, like what we're having now, can be almost anything. It's anything we can think of. Between TikTok and Zoom, we can be endlessly entertaining and taking care of one another. I mean, really feeding each other's souls.
It looks like he
Or
may
we
have
can
stepped.
be-
I'm sorry. It looks like he may have stepped away, and he left us a message in the text. But what we can do is, if you want to open it up, I can also unmute so people can actually communicate. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute those who might want a Q&A. So
This is always the fun part of these things. We'll see how this works. But thank you. While we're unmuting everybody, I want to thank all of our folks who are on this panel, all of the alumni. It's really an illustration of just how broad the work of the school has been, what an institution it's been, and how, I wish we could have this kind of celebration every week.
I'm going to come back while we're waiting for the others to come in, Steve, because I'm really proud of the fact that all of you are here and all the things that you have done since you came out of school and all the things we've been able to provide for everybody to help you on your journeys through life. New School is a very important institution, the one that has led the way in a lot of areas over the years, and you're all part of that, and I'm proud to be part of that. I won't be here for the next 40, but I've been watching this thing for 40, so I can speak from that standpoint. I'll let you get the question, Steve.
Okay. Well, please, if you want to ask a question, go ahead and drop your name in the chat so I can call on you. That's usually the most orderly way of doing this sort of thing. And I don't see a question just yet. I see greetings from Albert from Chicago, and congrats to everybody here. Anybody, before we get our first question, I mean, you've heard all of your colleagues speak. I'm speaking now to the panel, something that just really stood out that you'd like from this 40-year horizon question that you'd like to respond to. And if you have a thought, David.
Never at a loss for words, but I'm just proud of the institution of the New School of Architecture and how it's broadening really the broadening into these other trades of construction management and product design, because they're all intertwined, and it's all about free thinking. And the broader we can become, the more shoulders we can rub with, the better everybody's work is going to be. So it gets back to my breaking down the silos theme.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see Aaron here. You're unmuted. Did you have a question you wanted to ask or comment?
I did. Thank you so much. That was really enriching. I had a question. It's about housing in the next 40 years. And I'm prospective. I'm going to be hopefully starting at New School in January. And my question is, with the challenge that we're facing with housing so many people, I felt like there was such a great diversity of viewpoints that you all were sharing. And I have my framework for that, but I'm curious about people who maybe have different backgrounds and aren't working necessarily right now in housing, how you conceptualize that in your own workspace, in what you're doing now, how that, if you're working in healthcare, how does that issue connect to what you're working on now?
A volunteer for the first response? I'm going to turn to the industrial designers on this housing question as well, but who has a first response to that?
Again, I'll go. Possible. I feel like we need to challenge how much space and what we need in housing. I think we can certainly be more efficient in what it is that is a house, and being blessed here in the Southwest, more connections to the outside and less dependence on the inside. And I think that can all lead to economies and higher densities and sharing and collaboration. And everybody doesn't need 3,400 square feet on a 14,000 square foot lot. That's how we take up a lot of space and resources really quick. And it's just that somebody earlier said, I think it was Chad, we need to flip the paradigm and challenge some of these staples.
No, and I would agree in terms of the human side of that. Is I live in the border of North Park and Hillcrest. I have friends who live in Eastlake, and the day that Biden was declared the president, the difference being in a place where people can swarm out into the streets and celebrate, and you feel the energy, versus another friend who said he went to the end of his driveway and he looked both directions and he heard someone holler in the distance, and that was the full extent of like the celebration in Eastlake. So it's not just about the spaces we live in; it's about how that allows us, permits, or forbids us from connecting, right? So I think there's a real big future there. I want to ask maybe Trevor. We can keep rolling with other. If I want to see Trevor has his hand up here. Maybe we could see what he has to ask. Trevor, you want to unmute yourself? Is that you did put your hand up? Yes.
Hey, Chad. My question's for you. Hey, congratulations, Chad. First of all, it sounds like you're really successful now. I'm very proud of you. It's great having you as a student.
Thank you.
And good having you down in Mexico too. That was a fun trip. Hey, so I want to ask you, what did you get out of studying with, your product designer? What did you get out of studying with a bunch of architects and construction management people? What did you gain from that?
That's a great question. So one good thing, I guess, with studying at an architecture school where the majority is architecture is, all of our classes were with each other. So a lot of the cool classes, like one of the ones that Trevor taught was our US-Mexico Studies class. So oftentimes on all of our projects, we tried to make it tie into architecture or design in some sense. So oftentimes I'd be put in groups with architects, and it was really, really cool having a completely different insight into the way that things are built, because I kind of have my process of how a product starts. But architects' overall process is a little bit different. And it was really, really neat being able to kind of intertwine all of our ideas in these groups and just kind of learn different ways of looking at things. Because I think in any sort of field that you're in, having a little bit of diversity of thought from somebody who might not be doing the same thing as you, that can always go a really, really long way. So that's a good question, Trevor. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I could piggyback on the previous question about housing, because Marcelo, you're as a industrial designer. I mean, can you talk about housing a little bit? I mean, ways that we could help address the crisis, maybe through industrial design. Or am I putting you too much on the spot? I don't want to be a bad host here.
No, it's a great question. Can you guys hear me? It's just my computer's having a hard time unmuting. I mean, this is such a, I love that topic, by the way, but there's so many perspectives. One thing that I'd like to share that maybe doesn't directly answer your question, but I think it's a interesting perspective. I was hearing you talk about, the experience that we have by being in a suburban distant setting and living in a very dense population. I lived the last 20 years before I moved to San Diego. I lived in Sao Paulo, which is, crazy amount of 18 million people together crammed into traffic 24/7 basically. And when I moved here, one of the things that I was looking for was exactly to have the opposite experience, like to have, I now live with goats and chickens, and it's a completely different setting than what I used to have in Sao Paulo. And the only noise I hear from excitement are the coyotes at night, and that's kind of it. But I do think about, industrial design. When I was growing up and I was really young, I had the chance of being very close with a great architect in Brazil that had a lot of very disruptive projects in mass fabrication of well-designed housing at a very, very affordable prices and affordable costs. And the interesting and sad thing that happened there was that although he had this amazing technology and he was actually developing like really, really state-of-the-art technology for that, the big constructions companies in Brazil were so powerful that they kind of found a way to shut him down, right? So that was my very first kind of hit of how, you know, housing, and especially when you talk about popular housing, and when I was working with the politics, we were connected so many projects on that sense, how it has those two forces trying to find a middle ground. And now I come here to San Diego and I live in Encinitas, and I don't know how accurate that is, but what I hear here is that the city of Encinitas prefers to pay a fine every year than to do the affordable housing that we were supposed to provide as a community, as a city, just because, you know, people think that can devalue their properties. And so it's a very deep problem, and it, you know, I think maybe we don't put as much thought in it. I don't know, from an industrial design standpoint, other than the technologies I mentioned on the very early experience I saw firsthand, how we could help. But I think more importantly, as people, as a community, politically, I think that's where the big change needs to come first. Because I think we can find the technology to build housing at affordable prices. We can figure that out. How to figure people to, you know, be more open-minded about living together. That's what seemed to be the problem that is getting worse as we progress in the, you know, recent years.
Yeah, yeah. No, you do live in a city that would rather spend $2 million on legal fees than $1 on affordable housing. But that's my day job. Well, so folks here on the call, we're really reaching the end here. And is any last thoughts from any of you? I mean, I think we've raised a good issues. What is our role in maybe helping change some of those minds? And is that a design problem, or is that a social problem, or are those one and the same? Any folks have? That's a very broad question, but
I'm just gonna, Melina, you know, bring. Oh, sorry, this is Claudia. I'm gonna bring in maybe you know, sort of the legacy of New School. And you know, I was privileged to have Mike Stepner as my professor, and that's a lens that I always carry. That, you know, as a designer, as an architect, we need to start looking at the policy, and we need to get involved, and we need to, you know, raise issues that are affecting our community, and we need to back them up, and we need to take action. So I do believe that it's our responsibility.
Well, that's great, and that's probably the great note to leave on. We're at time here, and we want to respect everyone's time. I think that this last bit there is really important. This school has been about activist architecture, about activist design, about, you know, changing the community. And when we see what the alumni are doing, not just the folks on this call, but across the city, I constantly run across folks, colleagues who are doing amazing work. And so this school, I'm proud to be a part of this 40th anniversary celebration. I want to thank you. I'm really honored to be on the stage, the virtual stage, with all of you here tonight. I'm very proud. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mike Stepner, who is godfather of us all, and let him wrap up the night. So thank you, everybody, for letting me be here, for letting me be a part of this event. Mike?
Thank you. I want to thank Steve for being the moderator, and all of you for your insights. I think that you just, as I said earlier, you just prove the value of an education and what you can take out from design. And I will tell you that Steve answered his question, whether it's a social problem or an architectural problem, it's all the same. Architecture is a political act, it's a social art, it's a public health discipline. All of the design professions are that way. You guys are just wonderful examples of what could be, and you're going to go out and change the next 40 years for all of us. So I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the audience for being here and hearing the panel, and hopefully you'll join us for future events to celebrate the 40th anniversary of New School of Architecture and Design. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, panel, for a wonderful, insightful evening.